Well, of course, we are at the end of the week, and that means it is time for the Ottawa Bureau Chiefs. Robert Fife, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Tonda MacCharles, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Okay, so we've been gearing up for the G7 meeting that essentially kicks off on Sunday in Kananaskis. But obviously, we now have this event between Israel and Iran. Is that going to throw off the agenda? Will it derail the agenda at the G7, Bob?
That's a really good question, and I can't answer it. But I think it's going to have a huge impact on what the leaders are going to be dealing with, because as we speak, we know that Iran is targeting Israel at this very moment. So I think it's going to have a big impact on the whole G7 summit. I can't predict what is going to be, because we don't know what's going to unfold over the next few days, right? But even just leaving all that aside, the actual G7 agenda is going to be more important with the bilaterals. You know, all these leaders want to get a chance to get together with Donald Trump. They all have their own agendas. So I think from journalists who are going to be covering this is less that what the outcome of the G7 is going to be than these bilateral meetings with all of the leaders who are going to not only meet with Prime Minister Carney, and that I think is going to be important for us as well, but it's what everybody who gets the chance to talk to Donald Trump and comes out of those meetings that are going to set the agenda. And all of that, nobody has a clue, because, you know, who can predict what Donald Trump's going to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll believe he's there when I see his plane take off from D.C. and actually, and his motorcade arrive in Kananaskis. Like, I really think, though, that it does influence to a great extent a bit of their talks, right? Previous to the eruption of violence last night, you know, there was one working session, one working breakfast devoted to Ukraine and NATO, and then there was another session on global security. But I think that they can't escape dealing with this. It's a very precarious time for the globe. And so I think it rises up to the top of a multilateral agenda, if not all the bilateral discussions among some of the key players. But yeah, every G7 summit matters not just for who's coming and who's Zooming who in the hallway, but it also matters for the moment it's held in, and this is a particularly fraught one, I'd say. And so I can't believe that they won't be compelled to come out with some kind of statement on the need for de-escalation in the Middle East, and some kind of, even though that wasn't the plan, trying to avoid disruptions with Trump, to come out with a joint statement. They've got to somehow commit to a unified stance in resolving this crisis.
Yeah, although I wonder if it becomes a G6+1, since Donald Trump today, of course, saying that, you know, what's happening here really should speed up Iran making a deal, some type of nuclear deal, rather than calling for de-escalation.
G7 summits are usually about the economy, and everybody was thought, well, it's going to focus a lot on Trump and tariffs, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that is going to be dealing with that now, simply because this is so unpredictable what's going on right now.
Carney's agenda, actually, though, was focused on a whole bunch of topics already at the outset to avoid exactly that clashes with Trump. So there's global economic security, there's energy, there's emerging technologies, AI, quantum computing. They're very devoted to dealing and doing deep dives down into those issues as well. So we'll see. But I think that really it is the biggest, the most juicy stuff is going to be who's talking to who and what comes out of those bilateral talks.
Yeah, but then throwing this other ball into the juggle, though, which is now what's happening between Israel and Iran.
Absolutely, and it's not going to be the first summit that is influenced by international events like this. Let's remember when Russia invaded Crimea, in the territory of Ukraine. Russia was expelled later from the summit of the G7 that was at that time G8, and then it became G7. And Mr. Carney has made the point of inviting a lot of international leaders to that summit that are not part of the G7, namely Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to discuss what can be done to ensure there is some more security talks or peace talks with Ukraine. Now, I think this will have to be added to the table. And as Tonda mentioned, there's no plan to have a final communique agreed upon by all the leaders. There might be a push now to have something more common on that front, because if the Middle East erupt, the Middle East erupt into a full war, that's going to be more dangerous for the whole planet.
Yeah, but still, as we said, unpredictable, because it's hard to know where the United States gets
It's also going to be fascinating for us to watch. Carney's a serious guy. He's got an agenda, he's got a vision, and we're all, as journalists, are going to watch this. This is the first time he's going to have all these world leaders together. And we're going to have an opportunity to see how he performs. I mean, we don't know how he's going to perform. We're all going to watch. We know that he's done excellent work when he was the Bank of Canada, Bank of England governor, and all of these other kind of forums. But this is the first time you're going to see him perform as a prime minister at a major group of leaders, more than G7, because we've got a whole lot of other leaders. And it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Well, let me jump on that, because I do wonder about what image, what message the Prime Minister is trying to convey here, because you all alluded to it, but when you look at the guest list here, it's more than just the member states of the G7. We're talking about the Secretary General of NATO, we're talking about Volodymyr Zelensky, we're talking about, controversially, the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. But what is Mark Carney trying to accomplish with this meeting? Because it is a meeting of global leaders beyond the G7.
Yeah, and I think that there are multi-pronged goals of his in inviting those various leaders for different parts of the conversations. Obviously, Zelensky is very much there for his concern around the resolution of the war there and how it gets led. Is it a U.S.-led negotiation, or do they have a say in it? And is any ceasefire or any agreement going to be enforceable? That's a very focused discussion. But a lot of those other countries, if you notice, either they are leading other international summits this year, important ones like the UN Conference on Climate Change, the next one, or the G20 in the case of South Africa. But there is also an attempt, I think, to bring together middle powers from different global regions who want to say in how the big powers deal with some of the problems that affect them. But there's also Carney said it in his speech on defense earlier this week. He talked about the difficult sort of time for the rules-based order in the world right now, and talking about forging partnerships with like-minded countries, along different lines. And I think he's got that goal as well. I think he's trying to solidify different alliances, and we'll see if he succeeds. But I think that the number of countries, it's very common. G7 hosts often invite other country leaders. Famously in Italy, Berlusconi had invited Muammar Gaddafi, and he came with tents and camels and everything. But I think Carney has very carefully picked country leaders who have roles in conflicts that are perhaps not necessarily understood more broadly. But the UAE and Saudi Arabia, had he come, they have a very key role to play in the resolution of the Middle East conflict. So I think that's what you're seeing there.
And those two countries also have a lot of investment in intelligence, artificial intelligence. Clearly, Mr. Carney wants to tackle a lot of global issues at that summit. So for his first steps as the chairman of the G7, but also on international scene, welcoming those leaders, I think he's got high ambitions. And in a very interesting way, tomorrow he will be meeting the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, who's coming to Ottawa to meet the meeting. And so that, I think, is probably to make sure that Canada and Great Britain play the same cards at the same time, so that they can push together their agenda. And we'll see whether Mr. Carney will have also a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, with whom he met soon after he became Prime Minister. He knows quite well. Tonda and I were there during that trip. So he knows how to play his card to try to create alliances with Canada that can push the Canadian interests further.
Yeah, they're all talking to each other already, right? Britain, France, and Germany were talking today. Britain talked to Trump this afternoon. They're all already working the phones and building the basis for the conversations face-to-face next week.
Okay, so very quickly, literally 20 seconds for you. What are you watching out for when it comes to the G7 as it starts next week, Bob?
Well, how does the Prime Minister handle Donald Trump? it was a disaster the last time we had a G7 thing in Charleroi where it blew up on Justin Trudeau. So he's got to manage him really well. And how does he deal with the geopolitical threats that are facing the country? And this has just been thrown on his lap now. Yeah. How does he deal with Iran and Israel? We don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, same. I mean, those are the big key things that we've all got to watch next week. And I mean, you know, I get that he was very deft in sort of trying to avoid conflict by taking a joint statement off the table at the outset. But I still think that what I heard from every G7 country this week was that unity of purpose is really important coming out of the G7. And so how does that get reflected?
Yeah. Clearly, Mr. Carney wants to put his stamp on the international relationship of Canada, the foreign affairs policy of Canada, but with that summit. I'll be watching also whether Canada and the United States can get an agreement on abolishing the tariffs. There's been talk that there might be an exchange of documents between the two capitals that may achieve that. We'll see. As Bob mentioned so forcefully, Mr. Trump is a very unpredictable man. We don't know what we can expect from him, but that's going to be something I'll be watching.
Yeah, unpredictable even before what took place between Israel and Iran. Now a greater level of unpredictability. Somber times. Listen, Bob, Tonda,
Thank you.
Joël-Denis, thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
You too.